Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. I like to remind you each and every time at the beginning of the video to grab a notepad, grab a pen, because I want you to jot down notes. I want you to write down some sort of action item, something that you can implement in your business today to drive your business forward. That's what this is all about. We need to move your business forward. Speaking of which, recently we were engaging with a business owner who was contemplating strategies to grow his business, and he was trying to assess how much he should invest in marketing. And so that's a question I want to pose to all of you. Exactly how much money should you invest in marketing for your business? Have you contemplated this before? I want you just for a moment to think about it. Answer that question. Answer that question for your business. Do you know? How do you determine how much you spend on marketing? The answer, are you ready for the answer? Because I have an answer. The answer is the minimum effective dose. That may surprise you to hear me say that. I mean, some of you may be thinking, well, Michael, BMI has a marketing agency, and so you would have a vested interest in having people spend as much money, invest as much of their resources in marketing as possible. That would benefit you. On the contrary, Bickert Management only wants to provide services that drive your business forward. And insofar as anyone is investing with us, any amount of money that is failing to do that and is failing to have the desired result to accomplish the objective effectively, then we would recommend that they stop spending that money. And hopefully we could work with them to figure out exactly why that is the case. But you should always be doing this. We don't want to be hypocritical. You have a finite amount of resources, and you want to make sure that your investment in each of those resources, in anything in your organization, anything on your business, is effective in accomplishing an objective and it has a good return on the investment. So let's explore this concept through the lens of marketing. And how much should you invest in marketing? Well, there are, as usual, a lot of questions you have to start with in trying to figure out whether or not you're investing enough or how to solve any business problem. You got to start with asking good questions. So the first question I would say to you is, do you have a good representation, a good unique selling proposition? Does your product or service offer sufficient value in the market? That's where everything should start. All of your questions should start with that. And you may say, well, how do I really know that? And those of you who've been in business for a while would have a better indication of that than those who are considering getting into business or a startup. And what that is you should have evidence from the marketplace. Do you have satisfied customers is the number one thing. And if you're just looking to get into business or starting up, then the question becomes, can you make an educated guess that what you are going to offer is going to be at least on par with the value that people have with the alternatives or not? You have no business being in business if you can't offer a product or service that is at least on par with what else is in the marketplace. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that you made the decision that yes, of course, we do have evidence, we have satisfied customers, or making an educated guess, I believe that we will. And by the way, if you're a startup, you're going to want to invest a very limited amount of resources in sort of getting proof of concept, where you offer your service out there until you can say, yes, we have evidence, we have feedback. Oftentimes it's from people closer to you, your initial customers and everything, and they think we have a great hit of a product here. So how do you know you have satisfied customers? Well, repurchase. Have you got people that are willing to give you feedback? So maybe you may not have a consumable product that you're selling, and a person says to you that they're delighted with your product and they give you great feedback. Or a person, if they had to do it all over, or when that, maybe you are selling a consumable product, when that option comes, when they use up your product or they've used your service and the opportunity comes to engage you again, will they do so? And to the extent that that is the case, you can rest assured that you have a viable, unique selling proposition. You have a sufficient value in the marketplace. So that's the very first question. And we got to start there, even as obvious as it is, because let's talk to you business owners who've been in business for a little bit of time. It's not just startups who need to ask this question, because things change over time. Consumer behaviors change, the market changes, and if you're looking to weigh in the distant past and saying, yeah, I had satisfied customers at one time. I mean, businesses go out of business all the time. It's not uncommon, and that's because the value proposition that they have no longer represents what it once did. Or sorry, that's one possible reason for that. So don't assume that. We have to look that recently you had satisfied customers and you're offering products or services currently that are offering good value in today's market. Okay, so even those of you that have been in for a long time, you want to make sure that this is still true, and that's where we start. Because the reason we want to start there is if you do not, and we've already agreed that you have a finite amount of resources to invest, I'm going to recommend that you invest resources in improving the value of your product or services before you spend money on marketing. There is, we could say there's an infinite amount of resources that you could spend. That is to say, theoretically, there's an infinite amount that you could invest in marketing or any sort of investment in your business. And yet there's a finite return that you can expect from any of those investments. So therefore, there's this sweet spot that occurs. And you, to the extent you invest beyond the sweet spot, you're getting diminishing returns. And that's why I say you want to only invest the minimum effective dose. You want to accomplish your objective. So we start with that question of whether or not you have good value in the market. And if you do not, or it's not at least on par with what else is the alternatives that the market has, that your customers and prospective customers have in the marketplace, then you're going to want to invest in whatever resources it takes to drive up your value. And just to sort of demonstrate what I was talking about, that there's an infinite amount of money that you can spend on any sort of expense, then I guess the first thing we have to agree is that marketing, just like everything else, is an expense, and you want to drive down your expenses as low as possible, because that is going to help you operate more efficiently, be more sustainable, hopefully more scalable, more viable, and it will free up resources that you can put in those areas of your business that give the greatest return on investment. So since we agree that we want to control expenses, then you're not surprised, going back to the beginning here, that we're saying we want to invest the minimum effective dose, the minimum amount of a resource that will give us a desired return, with an understanding that there are diminishing results, diminishing returns beyond a certain point, what we might refer to as the sweet spot. And so now we've agreed that if you do not have sufficient value, if you do not offer sufficient value, or there's an opportunity to greatly increase your value proposition to the market, and you're considering investing one of your finite resources financially, then you should strongly consider whether or not you get a better bang for your buck, better return on your investment by investing that in improving your value proposition. So you might say, well, how do I know whether I should invest in improving my value because I already have satisfied customers, or I should spend that money on marketing to grow sales? So that's the next question. That's a great question. That's exactly how you got to reason through these things. So the next thing I would ask you is, do you have sufficient capacities to exceed demand? Do you have inventories to be able to sell more? Of course, that if you lack the ability to scale your business, to be able to meet an increasing demand, you're not going to want to spend more on marketing than you currently are. Maybe you're not spending anything on marketing, and I would challenge that, because when we talk about the marketing expenditure, that's not strictly advertising. Of course, marketing is all the efforts you put into getting your brand out there, awareness in the marketplace of what you're doing, even if that's not traditional or digital marketing. You may be maintaining your website or having social media, you're producing content, email campaigns, anything like that. So even if you're doing that stuff yourself, there's still a cost to that. Or if you have an employee doing that, or you have an agency doing that, you can divide marketing up into, different buckets about what that marketing investment is going toward. Is it going towards building a brand? Is it going to building awareness through content marketing and keeping you out there and relevant and updating your website? Or are you spending money on pay-per-click, display ads, traditional advertising, television, radio, print, all these kinds of things? Marketing is a lot, it's all encompassing, really, all the various things. So going back to that question we asked ourselves a moment ago is, should I spend more money on improving the value of my product or service, or should I spend it on getting the message out there and driving people toward me? That's going to depend from one business to another and one situation to another. I would ask you to contemplate whether or not your current, like if you're going with the status quo, can you grow sales with just word of mouth? I mean, word of mouth is the most powerful form of advertising. So if you've got a great product or service and you can grow sales with just word of mouth, then maybe you do want to invest. I think it make really good sense to invest in improving the value proposition. On the other hand, you might say, well, obviously word of mouth is so strong because I have a great value proposition. My product or service is better than the competitor. So you've got to weigh that and consider what is actually happening. What evidence do you have in the marketplace? What signals are coming back to you and indicate what direction you should go in? Now, we were talking about capacity, and do you have the capacity to grow and scale your business? So if you do not, and I know some businesses that don't, and that is they're sold out. If you get sold out of your inventory and you are unable to grow and scale, then you certainly don't want to invest in driving more people to come and have a greater demand for your product. You're just going to upset customers. And there's a lot of different ways that you have to scale. It's not just about inventory, the amount of products that you have that you can deliver to a customer, or the amount of service. It's everything that is necessary in the production channels, the whole system from start to finish. So maybe you start with sales and you have orders taken and this kind of stuff. If your sales team can't sufficiently meet the demands of your customers and keep up with them, and you've got leads coming in that are being wasted and not responded to, you have incoming inquiries on your website, your customer service mechanism, whatever it is that you use, is not keeping your customers satisfied, you're just going to end up damaging your brand. So you don't want to drive more demand if your capacities can't. And then of course, we talk about the actual inventories, the end product, whether you're selling an inventory of time, like in the case of contractors or healthcare providers, service providers, or your inventory is actual widgets of whatever. If you can't scale up and grow, then you want to consider investing those resources that you have, not in marketing to increase demand that's just going to upset the market, upset prospective customers who are disappointed by your lack of capacity, so far out and back orders and that kind of stuff. Instead, you want to invest that in increasing your capacity. So what does that mean? You have to look for what is the weakest link in your business. Is it your facility? Is it your manpower, your personnel, your human resources? Is it management? Or is it equipment? Is it technology? What are the things? Are there raw materials that you need to invest more in? Spend your resources on those things to increase your capacity. Now you want to try to do that commensurate to demand. You don't want to get too far out in front of yourself, investing a whole bunch and increasing your capacities with insufficient demand, because that can be a catastrophic mistake as well. So try to balance those things. But when you're asking yourselves these questions, the first thing you got to go to, we talked about, do I have sufficient value? Yes, I'm getting good customer feedback. I'm getting repeat business. And the next thing you want to ask yourself is, do you have sufficient capacity to be able to meet the demand. Another thing you want to ask yourself is, if I was to advertise more, if I was to invest more in marketing, if I was to increase the demand and interest in my products or services, what message do I have out there? And I've talked about this in a mini case study that's posted on our YouTube channel as well, where is your website sufficiently meeting the objectives that it should have? Does it demonstrate all the unique selling proposition? And I've got a whole video on what a website should do. But if you're driving traffic and more interest into your business, and this is all, again, it has to do with the capacity, but you'll damage your brand if you've got, a really poor marketing strategy in your website. So again, even though that does fall under marketing, I would say to you, make sure you first spend the money, if you're going to invest some money in marketing, then before you spend it on increasing traffic to your website, make sure that you have a good website. Invest resources in building a really good virtual store, virtual showroom, so that when you do increase the investment, when you do increase advertising and the interest and the number of visitors to your website, that you're not damaging your brand at minimum. So you now say, okay, I've got sufficient value, I've got the capacities to be able to scale, I can handle a little bit more business, and I also have a good website, I have good processes in place to be able to increase extra demand, and I still have the resources available to be able to afford to spend some money. Then I think you definitely should spend some money on marketing and grow your sales. And how much is from one business to another going to change based on the answers to those previous questions and how much is left over. Now, should you extend yourself? Should you go into debt to be able to do this? The answer to that question is certainly going to vary based on your risk tolerance and from one individual to another, and your ability to obtain credit, and what is debt costing these days. So if you have access to capital for very low interest and it's not going to be catastrophic to you, then that is certainly something that entrepreneurs do all the time. They take risk, but you want to minimize that. Don't go crazy with it. Don't invest so much that the whole business is relying on the success of this extra investment in marketing. Instead, try it, sort of do a little bit of extra marketing, a little bit of extra advertising, and is that extra interest paying off? Are you accomplishing the objective? Is it driving more visitors to the website, and are they being converted? And are your sales going up? Because when they do, then you are starting this great cycle, and you can actually start to invest more and more and consider it that way. Another thing you may want to consider is how much the competition is spending on marketing. Now, that's not to say you should define how much you spend based on what the competition is doing, but this is certainly something that people do in business, and they realize that if they have a competitor who is far outperforming them in terms of investment in marketing, or is committed to a lot more investment in marketing, even though you may have greater value proposition, it can be that you lose market share. So keep an eye on what the competition is doing, and you can get signals again back from what we were saying earlier. So you invested a little bit and it increased sales. If you are not getting a return on your investment in marketing, that could be a signal that the market is being saturated by competition who is driving business toward them, and you may need to spend a little bit more. But that's not the first place I would go with that. I would start to look at your conversions, and you want to do some exploration. Well, I spent a little bit of money on advertising. If it was pay-per-click advertising, search engine marketing advertising, then it should be very predictable, and you should be able to work it out, a cost per basis. So it's like, this is how much I paid for a click to get a visitor on my website, and that kind of conversion. You can take a look at that, and maybe there's some industry data that you have access to, or we can help you ascertain what that is for your industry, and you can figure out whether or not that is paying off the way you hope it should. And then look at the conversions all the way down the sales journey. And where are the customers bouncing? And we've talked about this before. So you need to do your evaluations, but as long as it's continuing to increase sales, then I would encourage you to consider perhaps investing a little bit more. And then as soon as we reach that weakest link where all of a sudden our value proposition is being affected, if you can't scale up without diminishing your value proposition and affecting quality, then we need to stop. It's like, no, there's no point in increasing demand if I can't meet the capacity, or if I can't meet the demand with my capacities without affecting quality. So once you start to see that your customers are giving feedback, that they're unhappy with your sales process or with your delivery process or the quality of the end result of your product, you start to disrupt your customers' satisfaction. Any sort of feedback signal like that tells you, okay, well, I need to now invest those resources. I need to tilt the scales, the balance back towards quality and scaling. So always look to the value, to your ability to increase your capacities through things like human resources, equipment, technology, whatever it is that is your weakest link, and then back to marketing. And that's the balance you have to take. And I'm always using fitness analogies. People talk about, well, if I want to gain muscle, how much do I need to eat a whole bunch of calories? And I would say, well, all that's going to happen if you just eat a whole bunch of extra food is you're probably going to gain some weight, but it's not going to be muscle, it'll be fat. You're going to increase your bulk on your body, but that's not what you're really trying to accomplish. You're trying to increase muscle. So you need to try to scale. In my fitness analogy, you would need to have a balance between, as your body is adding lean muscle tissue, you're increasing your caloric requirements, and therefore you need to have more protein and that kind of stuff. But you don't go hog wild, you don't go crazy on just a whole bunch of extra eating thinking that's going to pack on a bunch of muscle. It's the same with your business. You don't go crazy with a whole bunch of marketing assuming that's going to drive sales and therefore it's going to drive profit. There are these diminishing returns. So try to scale these things up commensurately and proportionately so that you maintain your customer satisfaction, you maintain your value, and you're outdoing the competition in terms of both of those things. And then you can start to invest more and more as those capacities allow you to. So I think that's in a nutshell how I would describe the process you have to go through, the mental exercise as you contemplate this for yourself. Minimum effective dose. Once you are taking so much on extra marketing or any kind of resource investment that it's no longer effective, it's actually producing diminishing returns, and it's just increasing your expenses, and you're not increasing your sales. You're not actually, you should be looking at profit in this case, your gross profit. Then that's a signal to you, okay, I need to back off. So it's all about, once again, measuring, asking good questions, evaluating. These things aren't intuitive. I mean, they may be somewhat intuitive. The longer you've been in business, these things make sense intuitively. But what I mean to say is that you need to spend some time planning this, managing. That's what effective managers do. They ask good questions, they measure, and then they test. And then they tweak small things a little bit at a time and see where the results take you. That's where I'm going to leave it today. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you've been able to better answer the question for your business. Should I be investing more in marketing? And if so, maybe it's in your website first before you start to spend more on advertising per se and driving more interest, so that when you do have that interest, they are finding that you have a good brand. Nothing that's going to damage your brand. Leave a comment to let me know whether or not we need to clear up anything, if there's more clarity on this issue required. Let me know what your experiences are. Have you spent more on marketing only to regret it later, or did you have a very positive experience? I'm curious, and when you leave these comments, we can all learn from one another as a community, and we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.